Do. I'm live. Hello, friends. Welcome to a meeting for the Annotation Station Book Club. Hi, I'm Steph. Hello, beautiful people. If you're here because you read this book with me, get ready to rant, as I have stated in the title of this video. If you're new here, welcome. Hi. The Annotation Station is a book club where we read 2 books every month with the goal of reading diversely and staying informed. We read a fiction and a nonfiction. And today I am reviewing the nonfiction for January, which was Takedown Art and Power in the Digital Age by Farah Nayeri. And as I have labeled this video, this is how not to talk about censorship, because I have a lot to say and I'm going to try not to scream. Let's see. Oh, Damien. Yes. Drink the haterade. Listen, I attempted to make notes in order to keep myself organized, and listen, it didn't work because my brain just went everywhere. So we're going to go with the flow. But before I get started talking about this, I'm just going to mention for anyone who doesn't stick around, what we are reading in February for the book club nonfiction. We will be reading and reviewing One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El-Akkad, which is supposed to be about the war, genocide that is happening in Palestine due to Israel's action. So we're going to be reviewing this next month. All right, so thank you, babe. I tried. I've been on like a makeup kick lately, so I feel good. Thank you. Okay, so I gave this book 1 star. Okay, I'm gonna go into as many details as I can. I believe that when it comes to reviewing nonfiction, it's important to bring receipts. So I got plenty of receipts. Okay, bestie, I'm here to bear witness. Thank you. Feel free to scream. Now, I will add the caveat, I DNF'd this. I actually got up to, I want to say like 60-something%, because it came to a point where I was literally annotating on almost every single page, like, I disagree. This does not make sense. That is not true. That is not how this works. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So for context, Farah Nayeri is an Iranian British art journalist who has written for a few very prominent art journals, internet online journals, and I've chosen 2 particular quotes from this book to start this off with, to kind of outline what my biggest grievance with this is. Okay. First, I'm going to read you something from the synopsis on here. And this is part of the reason why I picked up this book, because I was under the assumption, and also I will say that I did quote this briefly in my in my graduate thesis. I have a Master's of Fine Arts degree in studio art, and specifically my graduate thesis was on decolonizing the museums and white institutions and creating safe space for artists and somatic art practice. So that is why I quoted this from my thesis, but I did not read it fully at the time. I found a resource online that said this part of this book talks about that thing. I went to that one section. I was like, oh yeah, that's helpful. And I quoted it, right? And so that's not to say that there aren't moments in this book that are, I do agree with some moments, but once you read it all through, those moments are few and far between. So I decided, you know what, this is a great book club pick. Let's pick it up, and here's why. So artists nowadays are routinely being taken to task for their insensitivity to different communities and categories. Museums, galleries, philanthropists, and critics alike are recalibrating their efforts to amplify marginalized voices and respond to the people's demands for better ethics in art. But are they getting it right? And is it all just for show? So with that, I was like, this is going to be great for the book club for us to discuss. Now, I'm going to go to a chapter that I wanted to read the conclusion of this chapter to show you what the artist says and how they phrase certain things, that they kind of, what I feel like, bounce back and forth between liberal views versus more conservative practice, is the way that I'm going to phrase this. Because to me, she's giving very much centrist, and her attempts at neutrality in presenting this information are overshadowed by dog whistles, in my opinion, that demonstrate that she must have some sort of conservative upbringing, or financial interest, or protecting her political assets with the publication of this book because of the influence that she has in the art industry. And so she attempts to cover up those dog whistles with moments like this. It says, the episodes and anecdotes contained in this chapter all point to one thing, that it is time to give voice to the previously voiceless, not out of pity or compassion or charity, and not in an effort to tick boxes and satisfy quotas, but because those previously voiceless communities are there as a result of generations of colonization and enslavement by Western powers, and because their stories are, therefore, the West's own. Britain, France, and the Netherlands are former colonial powers with a culpability that they now have to face. Engaging with the culpability will finally make it possible to hear the voices of the colonized and their descendants, who now compose a not insignificant percentage of their population. In other words, the story now has to be told from the vantage point of the vanquished and their descendants, not just from the vantage point of the victor. Sounds great, right? Sounds beautiful. Hold on, put a pin in that, because in this same chapter, I'm going to go back. She gives 2 examples of artworks that are representative of marginalized groups, but she gives them from white artists speaking on behalf of people of color. And that is not conducive to what she was just saying. Thank you, friend. You know I love being an educated hater. I am not going to come in here and spread the haterade for all to drink without coming with receipts. So let me give you another receipt. Okay. So let me just go. Where is it? I also quoted this in a TikTok yesterday. Where is it? Where is it? Sorry, I literally annotated every page, so I'm like struggling to find. Oh no, it was definitely. I'm gonna get to Gauguin. I'm gonna go get to Gauguin and his child brides, which we will talk about. I'm looking for specifically blah 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 blah. Oh my god, I annotated so much. Where? Come on, Steph. Where is it? Okay, I found one of the quotes. Sorry. Here it is. Okay, so this specific chapter is talking about instances in recent art history. So she's pulling references specifically from the 2016 Whitney Biennial. The 2016 Whitney Biennial was a very what's the word? Divisive show, because there were multiple artworks that dealt with the theme of Black identity. This artwork specifically that she chose to write about was a painting of Emmett Till done by an artist last name Schultz. Hey, Robo, can't believe what, literally, she is a woman of color upholding the oppression. And I don't even know, honestly, if she understands that she's upholding the oppression, because to me, it seems like she's really drunk in the Kool-Aid. Okay. So to give you some context, the artwork that she's writing about in this section, a white woman who is a mother was interviewed stating that she decided to make this artwork as a painting of the open casket of Emmett Till because she felt that as a mother, that is within the bounds of her rights as part of her identity to speak about the loss of a child and motherhood. But specifically, the child that she painted, Emmett Till, for anyone who doesn't know, was a young boy who was wrongfully lynched in the 1900s, I want to say the first half of the 1900s, who was brutally murdered, and his mother decided to have an open casket funeral in order to put on display the harm that had led to the lynching of her son, who we later found out was innocent because the white woman who made false claims about him harassing her actually said in an interview within the past 10 to 15 years that she lied about her testimony. Okay, so there's that. So the artist Schultz decides to make an artwork about this because the 2016 Whitney Biennial specifically wanted art that was about race consciousness. And so she made this artwork and put on display. Black activists took issue with that artwork because she, as a white woman, is making a piece of art that is in a for-profit museum without the consultation of his existing family members, and she's making money off of this. She's getting publicity off of this. What is happening with this artwork is not reverberating back into the Black community in a positive way. And so Black activists protested this artwork, which I believe is rightfully so, right? Here's what the author has to say about that. In some cases, more activist voices are reacting to the centuries of exclusion by being exclusionary themselves, taking offense when their community's history and imagery are represented by white artists. The debate around cultural appropriation has flared up in the art world. In recent years, it has engulfed two particular artworks, both by white artists, and then she begins talking about the two white artists. You cannot say in the same chapter with the same breath that we need to be providing spaces for marginalized voices to be heard, but then use art made by white artists that are exploiting Black pain to exemplify that point. That is completely counterintuitive. That is completely insensitive. There were other artworks from that same art exhibition that I think would have made a much better example as to providing space for Black voices. And she chose this one, the one that was the most divisive. I was livid when I read that. Here for the vibes. Listen, I do not suggest that you read this, actually. This is quite bad. Yes, it makes it even worse. It makes it even worse. It is awful. Awful. Exactly. I mentioned this in the chat, in the Discord. So if anybody's here who's not in the Discord, please consider joining the Discord by becoming a book channel member, YouTube channel member, so you can get access to that. But I talked about it. I gave an example of another creative who I think did a better job of this. I am a Hong Kong stan, and Hong Kong is a Korean author who writes books about Korean history and Korean pain. And so, for example, the book Human Acts. Now, Hong Kong, as a Korean author, can potentially say is within her right as a Korean to write about Korean pain by exemplifying what happened during these specific events to write about the Gwangju uprising. However, she went the extra mile to get the consent of living family members before she started to depict the lives and happenings of individuals who perished during those incidents. And they gave their express permission. It's really not that hard. But at the same time, she is of the demographic who was affected and she was alive for these events. So there's like that duality there that makes sense for her to write about. And it's literally not saying that white people can't create art that makes space and has to do with the turmoil that is happening, that is causing pain to oppressed peoples, but it needs to be done with care. And I might actually give an example of how that can be done. Hi, I mean, I've been going on for a couple minutes, but I got plenty to talk about, so don't even worry about it. You know why it was published? Because Farah Nayeri is a prominent art critic for some major art magazines. And so this is one of the cases where someone is able to just write without being... There's also, I will say, in the art world, there's not enough people criticizing work like this and art in ways that are positive because of the backlash. There's actually, she gives an example of that in here, which I was very surprised to see her be against. I love Hong Kong too. Hong Kong is amazing. Also coming out with a new book this year, but that's neither here nor there. In the chapter with Gauguin, which I do want to get to eventually, she talks about a feminist art critic who openly speaks out about the use of children in explicit poses in artwork and says that they should be removed from museum spaces because it is... we need to draw a line somewhere, and that line should be drawn. Like, you know, freedom of creation, freedom of expression, all that is great until you start exploiting people. Problem. And that critic was receiving threats against their life, and the author did not defend her. The author actually took the opposite side. It was like, well, I think the art's beautiful. Honey, the children. What? Oh, it's been a thing for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. And it is a huge problem in the art world. So, to give an example of an artwork by a non-Black artist that creates space for Black pain and does it well. What was their name? Let me see. I'm gonna have to look this up real quick because I actually wrote about it, but I can't remember their name. Whitney Neal. Artist. Can I look up their name? No, of course the Emmett Till thing's coming up, but that's not what I wanted to talk about. What was their name? Okay. Oh, Joe Scanlon. There it is. Okay. So Joe Scanlon was such an interesting situation. So Joe Scanlon was presented to the museum as a white artist. And so here's why I think this work is genius. Joe Scanlon was presented to the museum as a white artist. They made a resume. They made pictures. They presented themselves as a white artist that essentially did blackface. And they hired a Black, I want to say lesbian, I could be wrong about that part, comedian to do stand-up comedy about Black history. And the jokes were like in that gray area of like funny, but also like messed up, you know? And so this artwork was protested. The truth is that Joe Scanlon does not exist and was never a white man. Joe Scanlon was actually an Asian man who pretended to be a white man because he knew that by creating a white persona, he would immediately get access into the museum space, which is a predominantly white institution, and therefore be able to get a platform to give space to these Black comedians, because the Black comedians by themselves, by their own merit, would never get access to these white spaces. And so that's, to me, an example of an artist who is not of a demographic using the power and privilege that they have, or perceived power and privilege in this case, because they are an Asian American pretending to be a white person, but still, to use that power in order to create space for others. So they were actually working in conjunction with the Black artists to make this work. And it wasn't until well after the protests and everything that it came out that this man does not exist. So that to me would have been a better example for this author to use. What did she go with? The white woman profiting off of black pain. You have a talent or skill that you want to show the world, you should be able to. Exactly. You should be able to. But unfortunately, that is not the case, because similarly to the publishing industry, the arts industry predominantly shows white bodies. So that is the case. Anyway, so moving on from that, where else do I want to go? So I guess I'm going to go into the Gauguin bit for a little bit, because that one also made me very heated. Very much so. Very much so. I mean, this happened only a couple years ago. This happened within the past 10 years. These examples that I'm giving. Okay. Actually, you know what? I'm going to stick with this for a second because I have something else I want to talk about. So is this still happening? In the book, actually something else that I highlighted, and I'll read to you as a quote. Today, American politics are no longer scapegoating artists and making political slogans of controversial artworks. That's because the American taxpayer is no longer the principal funder of artists and their careers. Money now comes predominantly from private sources, corporations, wealthy individuals, trust foundations, rather than from a federal government agency or from the mayor of a big city. So politicians feel less entitled to poke their noses into the contents of exhibition and to quibble with this or that work of art. That is not true. What I just read you, that she says this book was written in 2022. So fairly recently. That is not a true statement. Actually, just a few days ago, the Trump administration continues to stick their nose and their fascist ideologies into the art world by removing an exhibit of the history of slavery in Philadelphia. This literally happened 3 days ago. Sorry, 2 days ago. It happened on January 23rd. Today's the 25th. And now there are protests happening in Philadelphia because that is an integral part of American history. And so there has been a movement since, let me get the receipts, March 27th of 2025 with the Restoring Truth to American History executive order that it is to restore sanity to the institutions that are supposed to showcase the foundations of American principles under historical revision, our nation's unparalleled individual rights. And they decided to illustrate that by removing an exhibition of Black history just 2 days ago, 48 hours ago. So, and that is not new news. This is Trump's second presidency. So, Farah Nayeri, I would like to know what Kool-Aid you've been drinking, because I need some of that in order to make it through the chaos that is this administration. I don't know what she's drinking. I wish I could be that delusional, but unfortunately, I do not have the ability to turn my mind off. So, because she's stupid, okay? I don't think she's lying. I think she actually believes it, and I think that's because of her proximity to whiteness. Her family comes from a family of diplomats. Why should you want to remove a part of history like this? They're trying to act like, yes, that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to act like America has always been a perfect country with no problems. They believe that teaching American history as being founded on slavery, which it was, is damaging to the white ego. They believe that it's actually fake news and slander. They are paying journalists to spout this rhetoric. And also just last year, so the Smithsonian Museum, which is one of the largest museum institutions in the country, and one of them, so they have multiple buildings in Washington, D.C. that focus on different things. We have the National Portrait Gallery. We have the National Museum of African American History. We have the Jewish Museum. We have the Native American Museum. We have the Latino Museum. All of these things. If anyone comes to the United States and you get to go to Washington, D.C., I highly recommend it. I've been there a couple times. It is gorgeous. But also the National Museum of African American History is one of the most beautifully constructed museums that I've ever seen in my entire life. And so to learn that this past August, the Trump administration announced that they would be withdrawing financial support from the Smithsonian Museum for not complying with their regulations about how they believe that American history should be represented, which is to remove anything that talks about the truth of Black pain and suffering as the foundation to American politics, is exactly illustrating why she is incorrect. I would really like to know what she has to say about this now, actually. I haven't looked that up, but I would love to know. Yes, yes, yes. We were one of the last countries to get rid of, one of the last countries to get rid of slavery. Very happy. There's a lot of things wrong. But this whitewashing of history in order to preserve white guilt is at an all-time high. And for her to say that it's not, as the predominant art critic, is insulting to my intelligence. So there's that. Okay, so I think at this point I'm going to move on to the Gauguin situation. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So here's the thing. So Gauguin in the early 1900s is famous for his paintings of women. Gauguin had a wife and children, and he moved to the island of Tahiti. And when he did that, he took multiple child brides. I will not show you his artwork because I personally believe that his artwork should be censored. Now, you might be saying, Steph, the artwork shouldn't be censored. The censorship of artwork opens the door to many other things. I will get to that, especially when I talk about Thorpe, okay, and his photography in the 1970s. I will get to that. Listen, I believe in freedom of expression. As an artist myself, I believe the artwork should be able to say whatever it wants to say and use any materials that it wants to use until you get to the exploitation of peoples and you cause pain, especially on marginalized groups. That is unacceptable in my opinion. I will also say that this book very much is in defense of Christianity and Christian conservatives trying to say that religion cannot be used as a subject matter in art without causing Christian pain. And I'm like, get out of here. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that are regularly oppressed, because Christians, as the majority in this country, especially a majority within circles of power and wealth and influence and government, no, that does not qualify you to be exempt from criticism. But the pain of criticism upon marginalized bodies and children, okay? Thank you. That's simple. That's simple, right? So Gauguin in the early 1900s painted women in the nude, bathing. His brides, he took 2 wives, I believe, in the island of Tahiti after leaving his own wife and children. He was like, I'm going to go be a bachelor in Tahiti where there's no rules and I'm the white man who can get whatever I want. And so he married 2 13-year-old girls and fathered children with them and painted them. Now, it was very common. It is very common if you do research into, classical painting, that nude bodies all over the place, especially in religious iconography, nude bodies all over the place, right? But in a contemporary setting, to be showcasing paintings that were done by a pedophile for the sake of drawing museum goers is exploitation, in my opinion. That is exploitation of those young women. Are they alive today? No, this was about 100 years ago. Does it matter to me? No. Now, in the book, the author talks about, I'm going to put my feet up. The author talks about contemporary museums trying to tackle this issue by saying that they are acknowledging his problematic nature by putting up plaques that identify the fact that these girls, were taken advantage of. They were never made aware of what it means to be painted and have their bodies be sold to major, auction houses and museums and things for profit by this white man who, essayed them. And also there are art critics and art institutions who justify this by saying, well, at his time in France, where he was from, technically it wouldn't have been illegal to marry a 13-year-old. Okay, but we are in the year 2026. This book was written in 2022. I don't give a shit. I don't care that it was legal back then. I don't care the fact that we are looking at the nude bodies of these pubescent girls and admiring his artistic merit is disgusting. Where do we draw the line? And the author actually takes the side of the institution, which completely baffled me, because she, in that same area, is where she brings up that feminist artist who was getting threats for saying that his work should be canceled. And the author very explicitly is against cancel culture. But I would like to counter that by saying that people who are against cancel culture are people who are not willing to take responsibility for the actions of themselves or others in their community, or to acknowledge that there are people who are actively doing harm. Because if you are bringing attention to the oppressor for calling out the oppression, instead of actually calling out the oppressor, you are part of the problem. That's my opinion. Literally. Thank you. Thank you. They're acknowledging how bad that man was when he essayed two girls by still displaying his artwork. Plaque or not, take down that. He shouldn't be recognized as an artist. I agree. He should not be recognized as a master. I completely agree. I believe that it is exploitation. Okay. Now, you might be wondering, but Steph, has anyone else tried to do something about this? Well, yes, people have, and it keeps getting shot down. So I'm going to explain what happened. I'm going to move over to talking about another artist that is brought up for similar reasons in that same chapter. Robert, I always forget Mapplethorpe's first name. Robert Mapplethorpe. Okay. So Robert Mapplethorpe was a artist. Oops, I'm sorry. My ADHD has me moving around. Okay. Robert Mapplethorpe was a photographer in the 70s who was prominent in the queer community for taking pictures of queer people in the throes of ecstasy. And this was, of course, scandalous and blah, 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 blah. I was very upset to learn in this book that a certain series of his included a picture of children. So let's see if I can find that. So the thing is, he had a portfolio that was on view. I want to say it was posthumously, if I'm not mistaken. It was called the XYZ series. I could be quoting that incorrectly. Oh, I don't even know what I'm talking about here. So if I remember correctly, the Z series was about Black queer community. The X series was about gay men, and then the Y series was just about queer in general. I find it funny that if that was a woman or a person of color who drew 2 13 in prison and displayed it, would be exactly. Exactly. It would be taken down, but a white man can get, of course, this whole thing is exemplifying how white men are just getting away with everything. It's crazy. Yes. Yes, correct. And you know what's interesting is she does talk about that. She does give an example later in the book where a Black artist is doing something and the way they get taken down is crazy. Okay, so I'm not saying that there aren't moments in this book where I did learn, like I did learn a few things, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to recommend this with good conscience because of the way that she frames her narrative. So, okay, so Mapplethorpe, in one of those series that I just mentioned, has an artwork that is of two. Oh, I'm going to come back to this. I'm put a little tab on this. My little illustration that says the point going right over red. Has two children whose private areas are on display. And so this series ends up being taken to court. Well, not the series itself. The institutions that are showing this are being taken to court because, of course, our institutions, major museums, are government, do get government subsidiary. And again, I don't know why she would say that they're not, because they are. Even the Brooklyn Museum still does. But anyway, neither here nor there. So they're taken to court by right-wing conservatives. And the conservatives' argument is that, you know, that government, taxpayer dollars should not be funding art that is promoting the exploitation of children, that is promoting queer agenda, that is anti-nuclear family. I just found this. I literally just walked upon the sentence I was looking for before, where the author literally says, in reference to the Gauguin artwork, gorgeous though the exhibitions were. And I'm like, girl, shut up. Shut up. So the right-wing conservatives take the institutions to court under all these, you know, these pretenses. And so what's happening is that these notions to defund these museums end up getting taken down. And there's a duality to this situation. Because they are wrapping up their homophobia in with their argument that the children are being exploited, it all gets thrown out because no one wants to open up a can of worms of, if we start censoring art, when do we stop before we fall into fascism? And I can understand that. However, the fact that multiple times these things have been taken to court and the notion of protecting children keeps getting thrown out because it is being framed within a larger narrative of hyper-conservative propaganda is just mind-blowing to me. But then I remember the fact that we have a pedophile in the White House. And I'm like, oh no, it makes sense. It makes sense. And it's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate how smartly they did that. You know? And even though it is hyper-conservatives who were taking this to court, and you would think, oh, but they're the ones who are trying to stop the exploitation of children. Yeah, but they're forefronting it with their homophobia. And then, you know, the Democrats aren't necessarily innocent by any standards because, you know, if you look at the Epstein files, everybody's involved. So, like, no, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Literally. My house, more like the red house. It's such a red flag. It's not even funny. I did not find what I was looking for. I did not find what I was looking for. Oh, but I found something else. I will be coming back to that in a second. So yeah, so the author ends up quoting Mapplethorpe at one point, which is what I'm looking for, but I'm having a hard time finding. Is that the argument that was made was that the artist did not see the use of exposure of children in a pornographic sense. They looked at it as art, as an examination of the human body, and therefore it's about art. It's not about who the subject is. I completely disagree. 100% disagree. Okay. There's this notion in art history about highbrow and lowbrow art, and that is still the case today, where people don't use the terminology highbrow and lowbrow, but they very much act like that is still a thing. So high art was considered anything that was made for an institution to be critiqued, that had a certain level of skill behind it, that is by an artist with a prominent name. So like, honestly, you could look at Duchamp's urinal and people consider that high art. Is it a pivotal piece? Yeah, it is. Am I a fan of it? Not really. But like, that's my taste for it is neither here nor there. I can recognize it as the urinal is a pivotal piece in art history as far as like absurdism. But point is that we were in the 20th century, we were in this really pivotal moment in history when absurdism and high art and low art were becoming mixed with like the pop art movement and impressionism and all these other things, right? Surrealism and blah, 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 blah. So like, am I surprised that someone was using the excuse that, oh, but it's not about the fact that it's children, it's the fact that it's art. You have to look at it with an artistic lens. No, I'm not surprised. Am I surprised that this author in the year 2022 was siding with this ideology from the 1970s and the exploitation of children? Yes, that is absolutely not okay. But you know what? Girl, it's your book. Yeah. This is probably going to be honestly, the fact that I got something that might be my worst book of 2026 and it is January 25th is crazy. Crazy. Yeah. Okay. So I have a little under 20 minutes left. So I'm going to try to, before I go to my reading sprint. So another thing I want to talk about. All right. I want to talk about this. Girl. Okay. Again, coming with the receipts. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, this part pissed me off. Okay. Okay, I think I need to preface this. Sorry, I'm like viscerally. Beerus, do you want to yell with me, baby? Hi, baby girl. Okay. So, blah, 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 blah. I don't know how much context is going to give you. Mama, what is she talking? Okay, she's talking about racism. Beerus! My cat is messing with the camera. She's talking about racism and the fact that in like the early 2000s that certain countries, in this instance Britain and France, wow, decided to throw their 2 cents into the ring as far as saying like this whole woke agenda of talking about race is really just an American problem and Europeans don't have a stake in that race against colonialism, right? Beerus, okay, you gotta go. Okay. Ford argued that the poor in England were worse off than the slaves in the colonies and that the money made from slavery trickled down to the England's impoverished populations. Like, what the fuck are you saying to me right now? And she quotes to this person that she's talking to, when I've spoken to people in the UK about the history of colonialism, there's still this overwhelming assumption that imperialism happens somewhere else. Yet so many of the paintings, portraits, and objects in museums were instruments in the writing of colonialism and the creation of British national identity, such as colonialism, quote unquote, cataloged the world and set up hierarchies between nations and peoples. Museums cataloged objects, created hierarchies, and contributed to the perpetuation of discrimination. So I will say that she at least does acknowledge that for some reason the rest of the world believes that colonialism is really an American problem and that racism doesn't exist in European countries and the rest of the world. And it's like, honey boo boo, racism exists in every country. So sorry to break that to you. It really does. But there you go. I'm throwing her a ball, right? And then on the next page, okay, she said, Positive discrimination is difficult to implement because people cannot be categorized according to their ethnicity. So the museum world and its exhibitions, collections, and management remains overwhelmingly white and male. Positive discrimination does not exist. I don't know where she pulled that from, that terminology, but the way that my eye tweaked out when I read that, because I was like, girl, don't sit here and try to make an argument for reverse racism. Okay, so the reason that positive discrimination doesn't exist, as a technical word person, thank you, Rouge. I can tell you for a fact that we have a huge race. Yes. If you talk to people, especially people of color in other countries, they will tell you racism does exist. Thank you. What is positive discrimination? Wonderful question. Thank you. Listen, it does not exist. It does not exist. Okay. Discrimination inherently has to do with an power imbalance. Positive discrimination, from my Googling, because I Googled it, at first second I was like, did I miss something? Is this a thing that I've never heard of before? How could, there's no way she's using this in the way that I think she is. And lo and behold, she was. Positive discrimination insinuates that the people who are being deprioritized, in this case, white bodies, are being marginalized because of affirmative action. And that is not true. That is not the case. That is actually the part of the argument that was made. I think it was I want to say it was in 2024 when affirmative action was deemed unconstitutional in the United States. If anyone here remembers that, might want to fact check me on the dates, but I believe that was part of the argument that was made. And that was one of the biggest mistakes that I believe we made in that year as a country. Absolutely horrible. That is not true. There is still a power imbalance. Whether whoever's reading this book or writing this book wants to acknowledge that what affirmative action does and is, the way that she's phrasing this does not recognize the power imbalance. So I don't know what point she's trying to make. Exactly. There is no such thing. So we can make up words and phrases to make things like racism, discrimination. Okay, sure. Adding the word positive is an oxymoron. Correct. I literally annotated it and said, that's a paradox. It does. And that's not, no. Yes. It's like, exactly, you're cool, but yeah. Seriously. I feel like there's something personal going on with her here. And I'm like, girl, you're dancing around something. And I don't like it. Dancing around something. Then she goes on to say, the other issue is that debates around racial equality and identity politics are generally viewed as suspicion by the French and dismissed as outbursts of American-style political correctness. Again, because other countries are dismissive. But she agrees. Okay, and then on that next page, she says, it is a principle that she says, France was wedded to the Republican principle of universality, that a citizen was an abstract figure with no skin color, gender, or particularity, and that all citizens were equal in terms of their political rights. It is a principle that children were taught from the day they were born. It is explained why the French were more resistant to identity-related debates originating in the United States. Girl, no, they didn't. They did not originally. What are you talking about? Colonizers came from Europe, and they came here and they did things. What are you saying to me What are you saying to me right now? Why are you insulting my intelligence? Oh my God. And what's crazy is, like, to me, throughout this entire book, she tries to take a neutral stance. She presents this information. But this is something I have slowly become louder about, I think, in the past couple of months as I review things. Just because you present a problem does not mean that you are effectively critiquing that problem. You need to say something. Farah Nayeri, what do you think about this issue? Because all you're doing is pointing it out and then occasionally dropping little things like, well, I think Gauguin's work is beautiful. And, I think it's a good thing that we avoided censorship at the expense of children. And I'm like, girl, honey boo boo. Yes, she is a very prominent art critic. Yes. Yeah, same. Literally, we are seeing that right now as citizens are being abducted by ICE because of racial profiling. What's crazy about this is that what you're saying, Rouge, is true. There are people who think that these things originated in America. But what she's also illustrating, and I will say maybe, again, throw her another bone, is that there are people in other parts of the world who also think that these are things originated. So it's not just Americans who think that, because as she's pointing from these people that she's interviewing that are French, they're like, yeah, those are American problems. We don't have that issue in France. We don't believe in any, we don't see color. There were slaves in France. There are Black French people. What are we saying? Oh my God. Creole and other languages literally exist because of French colonization. So like, what are you saying to me? So, yeah. Is there anything else I want to point out before I wrap up this video? Because I've been ranting for an hour. I said that. Talked about that. I don't think so. I think I talked about, again, I DNF'd this at like 65%. So, and that was, oh, I think I might end it with this little bit right here. We are arguing about citizenship and who does and doesn't have it every day. The language around who is a citizen is scrutinized again and again from different angles, both positive and negative. In multiple spaces, this is an issue. Thank you. Correct. And it is not a new issue. It is not a new issue by any means. And she is writing this in 2022 as if it is. Don't help themselves, but also they're going to say that that's, yes, correct. I'm going to end this rant review by reading this to you. Oh, God. I could also understand the perplexity African Americans might feel to discover that what was probably the first mainstream artwork on the subject of Emmett Till should be the work of a successful white artist and should be displayed by the Whitney Biennial, a ticketed and high-profile exhibit. That sound is my cat taking a dump right behind me. Please excuse the scratching. Emmett Till was a symbol of quasi-prophetic significance to African Americans. Why, they asked, should he not be portrayed by an African American? Yet I am also of the opinion that this artist Schultz had every right to produce that painting. Her skin color did not disqualify her from doing so. Most of all, I feel no artist's work, no matter how sensitive or offensive or controversial, should ever be threatened with destruction or destroyed. And then I wrote a little line that says, wow, the point just flew right over your head. And I think I'm going to leave it there because my brain's going to explode. I'm laughing because it's hysterical how much the point just flew over her fucking head. Oh. Did she say that an art piece should be? Yes. Yeah. I love my cat's timing too. Beerus, you're a genius. Thank you, Beerus, for your comedic timing. Okay, my loves, friends, amazing people. Thank you for being here, as always. I have live streams in 5 minutes. Yeah, if I don't laugh, I'll cry. I'm gonna be doing reading sprints. Dang, Beerus, that stinks. Okay, I gotta fix this before I start streaming. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. Join the book club if you're not already in it. It's like $1.99 a month for the lowest subscription level to get access to the Discord. So, support me, my shenanigans, and my bestie Natalie, who's my co-host, and us doing more stuff like this. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna get ready for the next stream. Bye.